Hi, my name is Kate, and I love to read. Like, I was carrying books around with me before Kindles were a thing. So I decided to start a podcast where I interview the authors of some of my favorite books, ask them all of my questions so that I can read between the lines of the books. Hey everybody, this is Kate on Between the Lines, and I am here with Yasmin Angoe, the author of Her Name is Night, which I read this year and was totally obsessed with. I stayed up until like 2:30 reading it one night. It was that suspenseful. So, welcome to the podcast, Yasmin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You stayed up until 2 and I stayed up until 2 writing it. So, hey, it all works out.
That's funny. I believe it. Because it's a longer book too, but I couldn't put it down. So this is your debut novel, right?
Yes.
So kind of keeping that in mind, when did you know that you wanted to write a book or be an author? Like when did that come to you?
Oh gosh, that's gonna be like the traditional, I guess, author answer. I knew that since I was a wee little child. But yeah, honestly, I did know that since maybe my um elementary, middle school years. Because I was an only child of a single mom, so I and she's an immigrant, so I didn't have a whole lot of friends and things like that. So I was lonely. So books and writing and my Cabbage Patch dolls were my friends, and that was my entertainment and my babysitter. So since then is when I really developed the love and really wanted to be a writer. And I wrote all through middle school and high school and everything like that.
That's amazing. So like were you writing like stories or did you even write like novels in middle school and high school?
Yeah, so I wrote my first, what I call a full-length novel. It was it in middle school? Maybe like fifth grade, sixth grade. And that one was like it was about a bunch of woodland creatures that were trying to save their home. And I still have it. I wrote it on loose leaf paper with a blue Bic pen, and I still use blue Bic pens to this day. And so it's in my room right now, and it's all faded and the blue ink is like blurry a little bit. But I always said, oh, one day I'm gonna like actually like print that one, because I kept it, like that was my very first story. And then in middle and high school, then I started writing about, teen angst and stuff like that. So yeah, I call them all novels, but they actually just fit into like, one of those one subject spiral notebooks, because that's what I wrote.
Yeah, that is so cool. And that you still like use the same pen now. I haven't written anything. I'm kind of
Mhm,
trying getting back into it, but
mhm.
it's the same thing like growing up like I was kind of similarly out of loneliness would like just like write stories and when you were saying that it was like bringing back all these memories of like literally handwriting, not typing like I do now. So
Mhm.
that's amazing. That's really
Thank
cool.
you.
So I mean, your writing process you probably started kind of developing your writing process when you were younger. But what is your writing process like now? Do you typically know the plot? Do you know the characters first? I've heard it both ways. Like, kind of how do you set out writing a book?
Right. Well, so for Her Name is Night, I kind of knew the character first. I knew that I was going to write about a woman who was really high up there, like in a criminal organization. At that time, the organization, the tribe, was going to be like an actual like criminal entity, and she was going to be like the godmother in a sense. But so I knew that, and then I kind of built the story around that. But then when I changed the objective of the tribe, then that's when like the story kind of like formulated from that. But most of the time, I will have just an idea of like, something that I'm really interested, or that I heard like on TV, and I was like, oh, I think I could like write a story about that. So most of my stories come from just an idea that kind of sparks off, and then I'll just kind of write, a line. And I just did it this morning of, something, hey, this is what I'd like to write about. And then I'll take the time to kind of to marinate and build that idea before I actually start doing any real work with.
That's awesome. So you kind of have an idea, it kind of comes to you from different things. It might be like the character first or just like something you experience. So then when you get to like actually writing like all of the main characters for the book, how do you approach like getting to know your characters?
So I'll do like a character profile of them and it'll be pretty loose, but like the main things that I kind of want to know, like if this person is going to be like a jerk or if this person is going to be strong, and I'll kind of fashion it. And that's what kind of helps me start. And then as I'm writing is when I really get to really know my characters, and they just kind of flow out how they want to be. And then I kind of go from there. Then I'll jot that down just to make sure that I remember it. But by that time, I pretty much have an idea of how that character is going to be, so I won't really forget that they're supposed to be this kind of way or whatever. But I'll kind of know what they look like. I'll even have a name for them, and a lot of times their names will change in the middle of my writing process because the name also is something that's important to me. So it kind of will, if it doesn't jive by the middle of the book, then it changes into something that kind of sounds.
Yeah, that's really cool. I hadn't even thought of like that you could change a character's name just kind of like as you get to know them, but that
Mhm.
makes a ton of sense. So what specifically prompted you to write Her Name is Night? Like where did that I mean, you kind of said that you knew you wanted to write it about Nina, but where did like the inspiration come from?
Sure. So the inspiration came really from, so this was back in 2011, 2012. And like I said, I had an idea that I wanted to write about my next story that I'm going to write is about this woman's going to be a thriller. And she's going to be a crime, mob lady or whatever. But then at that time, I'm really big on watching like a lot of thrillers, and I read a lot of thrillers and things like that. And I just really wasn't seeing um, people who look like me in that kind of role. And I wasn't seeing at that time women in general in that kind of lead position where they're not the romantic interest or the damsel in distress or the girl Friday. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, I think I'm just going to write about somebody who looks like me, who's an immigrant, and who is able to do all these things that that all those people, Jack Reacher and Ryan and even John Wick and all of them are doing. But she's a female, and then she's also a woman of color. And so that's kind of what set that off. And then also at that time I had recently lost my father, and so I really wanted to deal with, I was dealing with like the grief, and some guilt for not being there when he had passed. And those all are things that come into play in the story. Guilt, and the relationship between daughters and fathers, and family and things like that. So all of those things that I was dealing with, I just decided, well, I'm going to kind of write my emotions and these things that puzzle me. And so that's how all of those different elements got in there. Did I even answer your question? Because
No,
I
you
start to
did.
babble.
Like it was a really cool answer because as you were saying it, I was like, you were just kind of saying like I didn't see myself in this genre, but I love this genre, and then also like the circumstances of what was happening in your life. So it's kind of like all kinds of things came together to help you write that story,
Yeah.
which I mean that's pretty cool. You were mentioning like Jack Reacher, the those types of thrillers. I was going to ask you if you're a fan of like thriller books and movies as well. So it sounds like
Hmm.
you are already. So
Hmm.
that's probably where some of that was coming from. Did you like do anything specific to like learn how to write such great like action sequences? I feel like with your book, it like all felt like so realistic. Like I like spy thrillers on TV and I don't always feel like they translate in books, but yours did. So how did you learn how to write
Thank you.
action?
Thank you. Well, so I studied, all of those, and I'm a very visual kind of reader. I like to be able to imagine what I'm reading, and so that's why I guess you'll see my books are always a little bit thicker because I want the reader to see exactly what I'm seeing, and I want them to be able to play like a movie in their mind through my words. And so with those action sequences, I love, like I said, action and everything like that. So I'll be there and I'll look at all of the different moves and gestures that they make, and all of these things. But I also wanted to try to make the action that she's doing realistic. Like she's not going to take on 1,000 people at the same time and be able to like beat them all, or she's not going to be climbing up a wall and doing all that stuff. She's going to really try like that hand to hand combat, because I like that kind of realistic fighting. Not that I've ever done it in my life, but so I just kind of write it as I see, and then I also, when I'm writing it, then I'll actually even try to like act it out. So, I'll write it and then you'll see me like kind of doing some hand movements. And I like to joke around because I'll do it and then my family will like walk past the door and they'll see me in like mid action and they're just going to be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "It's research. Don't bother me. Like, I'm doing research right now." So I think they're used to seeing me in very odd positions when I'm working.
That's so I'm like, I think there's supposed to be a second book in the series, so now when I'm reading that one, I'm just gonna be imagining you, like, jumping around
Yeah,
your
yeah, my
office.
leg up in the air and I'm doing all sorts of things. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. That's so cool. So I'm gonna start asking more about the book. So at this point, I do like to tell people like this is gonna be the post spoiler part. So if you haven't read the book already, go read it and then come back to this part.
Mhm,
But now we're just gonna dive into the book. So the book definitely covers some heavier trauma.
mhm.
The past timeline has a lot more pain than the present one does. Did you incorporate time hopping sometimes to kind of like get out of the heaviness of her past so you weren't always there?
Right. I definitely did that for the reader. I didn't do that for myself. For myself, I wrote, to me, it's two stories, it's two books in one. And so I wrote that way. So I wrote the befores all the way through from beginning to end because for me as a writer, I felt I couldn't write Nina in her present day as well as if I hadn't gone through her whole past first to kind of know where she would be, like her mindset and her and just her feelings and everything. So I wrote that all the way through and it was super heavy, like you said. And so it was hard for me and I had to take breaks and I had to, talk myself through it and be my own therapist and things like that. And then I wrote the present. And so I built that up for myself because I knew, okay, she's really gonna get like her comeuppance, at the end. So that's what really kept me going. And then when I wrote the present day, then that's why you might, feel really vindicated because I felt really vindicated because she'd been through the ringer, and even though it was me writing it, I still felt every single word that I wrote for her because, she is, an extension of me in a sense, all of my characters would be. Um, and so when I was creating it for the reader, I knew that I wanted to put I was going to scissor everything and I was going to put her befores in those critical moments so that the reader would understand in the present day why she might be acting this certain way in the present day because I just read or I'm about to read what happened to her at that time that might be the reason why she's doing this one particular thing in the present day. So I was a little bit more strategic after I had written, both of them in how to splice them together.
That's really cool. It was actually kind of reminding me when you were saying you had to do some of your own therapy on yourself dealing with it. I had never really thought of how much a dual timeline approach can kind of even mirror what therapy is like because in therapy you're trying to learn why you're doing what you're doing in the present. And
Hmm.
so like if you could just have your like past lined up every time it matched what was happening, that would actually be helpful for anyone who is in therapy.
Right, right, yes.
So with those timelines though, some of that, I mean, you kind of just answered that, but there was like some parallels where the past and the present were really similar.
Hmm.
So like Nina started coaching Georgia self-defense in the present at the same time that she was in the past. And so it also did kind of feel like it was a story about like overcoming powerlessness.
Hmm.
And so was it kind of intentional that you were showing like growing and healing wounds in the present kind of while showing the wounds from the past as well?
Absolutely, because I definitely in book one wanted to really cover Nina's growth and how she overcomes these things. Because when we meet her, she hasn't overcome. She's overcome them. She's compartmentalized everything, and she's only been able to do her job like as a robot, right? And so when she meets Georgia and she kind of goes off script and helps this girl, and she probably would have helped anyone, but this girl really, how we meet someone who just reminds us of ourselves, of our former
Yeah.
selves or whatever. And so Georgia is around about the same age that Nina was when everything happened, and she just kind of sparks something in Nina, like, hey, I remember this girl, and it's going to be someone that she hasn't thought of in like over 16 years, is herself as this child. And so that kind of just sparks everything off for her, and that's why she feels so close to Georgia, in that Georgia also has lost a mother, and she's very close to her dad, and she's kind of trying to figure out who she is and what she wants to do, and also Nina hasn't had a kid in her life, right, in all these years, and so it's very different for her, and she's also kid like in that sense, like she's learning too, like this is a different kind of adulting that's going on, and so let me figure out what that's like, and this girl is so perplexing, and so yeah, so Georgia was definitely her healing process and helping her to heal, and I think I want to be a better person, not just for me but also for this girl, because I think I can help this girl, and that's what and I'm also talking about like found family, and so Nina and
Mhm.
Georgia find each other and become that family for each other that they've been.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of those really cool things about how you can have your family of choice too. Like whether it's just because your current family isn't in a great spot or because they're not alive anymore, you really can
Mhm,
recreate a family around yourself. That was
mhm,
definitely very much there. There's also kind of like a focus on how your life can feel, that it gets kind of like bifurcated into before and after when you
mhm,
experience a traumatic event.
mhm,
It's one of my favorite quotes at the end. It says, she'd try to find a way, she being Nina, to have what she deserved back in her life again because she was Nina Knight. She had shaped her after, she had made it her now. And most of all, she had learned to cherish every memory she had, both the gifts and the curses.
mhm,
I love that. I've done therapy myself. So there's like been levels of like having to accept that I don't necessarily dislike the curses or the bad things that happen to me
mhm,
as well.
mhm.
So were you kind of like trying to go with the book, just kind of like integrating there, or like as a theme that like integrating and accepting your past can like make your present even feel better?
Well, yeah, because I had to accept, my past and make those choices too. I was, going through a lot of life changes at that time, and I think that if I hadn't accepted how, like, this is just how it's going to be, so how do I live from it and move on from it, then I would still be in that spot, and it would be like a hamster wheel, and you'll just never have any growth. Really something that I really wanted to like hit on, is that, things are going to happen, and it's how that shapes us, because it's to be something that hopefully won't be repeated, or we'll figure out how to. I mean, well, you can't stop death, right? But you will know next time maybe how you can help yourself to get in a better place a little bit, or what it'll take for you to kind of get over that a little bit more, and things like that. And so, and some things that are in our past help us to become a better person, help us to become a different person, if not a better person. And so that's why, there are things in our lives that are defining moments, and from that is what makes you, continue to make you. Or is it what you want to be? If it's not what you want to be, then this is your moment to, like, make some changes, and so use those events in your life to decide what you want to be, and who you want to be, and how you want to be, and so that's what I had to do. And so I just, that's what the character does, and those were things that I wasn't sure about, and so I was exploring it myself. And so it really wasn't until the end of the book was when I actually realized, hey, this is what I have to do, this is how I need to shape my life to make.
I love hearing how much like what you were going through was like helping you as you wrote it. That makes it like so much more personal too.
Mhm, mhm,
Kind of with those other themes, there's definitely like a little bit of a theme of like misplaced guilt. So, kind of like near the end of it, she's kind of talking about something that she had felt guilty about, or she blamed her brother for as well. And she finally says or thinks Nina had eventually come to learn that she'd never been blamed either. She'd realized her guilt was self imposed and
Mhm.
needless. And one of the biggest hurdles with PTSD is often dealing with unnecessary guilt and how much guilt sticks with you.
Mhm.
So, in writing Nina, did you research like some of the effects of trauma, or did that kind of did you instinctively include it and it just happens to be there?
Right. Well, that was definitely instinctual, because it was she's going through survivor's guilt, and I was going through, guilt of like not being there when my dad passed, and guilt of what could I have done more when he was here, to maybe have prolonged his life, or to be that support that he needed, when he was getting ill and things like that. So that was the extreme guilt that I was dealing with, to be perfectly honest. And I still deal with it now. Nina is still going to deal with it because it never leaves you, that guilt. But it's like I said, how you cope with it and remind yourself it's not your fault, it's not your fault. And so that's when she learns to remind herself it's not your fault, it's not your fault. But there are always going to be slipbacks where you're thinking. And so I had to, say to myself, Yasmin, it's not your fault, but I still can't help, feeling like, what if? There's always going to be that what if. And so that was something else that I was like really exploring, and she would be exploring it too. And you just really can't help, but to think like, why, not do this? Why did I survive when all of my family didn't? Which is what like Nina is thinking, and why not me? And what, what could I have done differently? And so um I just really it's hard. It was hard then, it still is hard now, and it's still going to be difficult for her in, future books, because honestly, that's not something that ever really goes, like I said. But it's something that you eventually, kind of train yourself to keep going, and to remember that this is just me in my down day. Um, and this is me thinking this today, but tomorrow I'm not going to think this. And so that's how I got through it, or how I get through it every day. It's a daily thing, and that's going to be the same for her.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of learning for myself to accept that all feelings are temporary.
Mhm.
So, if especially if I don't ruminate on something, the feeling might be even more temporary.
Right, right.
Like if I don't make it a big deal, maybe it'll actually go away and it's not a big
Right,
deal.
right. And I mean, I still, I think I was just thinking that earlier today. I was like, Yasmin, you're really thinking about this thing, and you might need to stop thinking about it. And so it's really like really telling yourself and listening to yourself, when when you tell yourself to stop, really stop.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's easy for us not to listen to ourselves. Maybe if someone else told us that, then maybe we would be like, okay.
Yes.
But it's hard for me sometimes to take myself seriously. I'm like, yeah, Yasmin, you're telling yourself to stop, but do you really mean it? And I have to be like, yes, I mean it. Stop. And then you feel
Yeah.
better, a little bit better at least. And so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you mentioned how she'll be in the next books. So that does mean that we have next books. And then what I wanted to know, so Georgia and Court were kind of both her kind of like a family of choice that developed in her present timeline. Are we going to see more of them in the second books? Are you able to tell us? Like,
Mhm.
if you can't, that's fine.
Right, 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 right. So we ended on with them on a question mark, right? Because
Yes.
so we're not too sure how that's all going to play out, because not Georgia, but Court and Nina are on two very different sides, right?
Yeah.
He is a law person, and she is we make our own justice kind of thing. And so I don't know how, well, I do know, but how I don't we don't know how, they're going to come to that conclusion. One of them has to be accepting of like the other, and see what the other is trying to do, and then they both have to really be respectful of what, the other feels. And so that's something that's definitely going to be explored, in the second book, and I hope that Court and Nina can make a go of it. It will always probably be precarious between the two of them because of where they stand. And even though Court might be like, okay, maybe I can, you still, if you've always been a person in a particular way, you always will still have like a kind of like thought of how things should be. And they've just lived two very different lives. So definitely we'll see more of Georgia too, because I really love their relationship. And I think Georgia really humanizes Nina, and really is bringing back all those human traits that Nina lost because of her experiences. And she was just really a robotic shell of her former self. And so now all of those things are coming back to her and brought through Georgia.
Yeah, that's kind of you hear with parents that as their kid hits certain ages, sometimes that's how they're like going back and like thinking about what they were like at that age. And so it seems like that's definitely what's happening with her in Georgia for sure.
Mhm.
My final question is, so the book was so focused on before and afters and how one moment can make such a clear before and after. How are you feeling in your after of becoming a published author?
Oh, that's a really good question. How am I feeling? I am feeling all the things, to be honest. Like, it's a daily thing for that too, because I'm very much a person. I'm an introvert, and writing is a very, I mean, because you write as well. So very is
Yeah.
writing is a very solitary thing. And so but writers love to talk about their work too because we spend so much time with it. So I love that part of it. And then like the marketing and the publicity part, I'm not so much because I'm just like, and I still feel, when people say, "Oh, I like it," and so even when you were saying you stayed up until 2, I'm like, "Really, girl? Why?" Because I always think about, the time that it spent for me to get here, and I know that I love the book, and I am always very like surprised when people say that they like it too, because I just thought that everybody would think that I'm weird and why do I have all these things going on in my mind like my mom thinks. That's what she thinks. But like I joke around and I tell people that writing, and then when people read it, it's like I'm in a group session for therapy and I'm the only one sharing. Nobody else but me. And I feel like it's very not fair. Everybody else should be sharing because that's what a group therapy is, but it's not the case. And so it's um it's good, it's great. I mean, I would not change it for the world, but then it's also, something that I get very intimidated by, and I hope that, people will continue to enjoy the work that I produce because it doesn't come easy. um, and it's really me pouring my everything into everything that I write, and so hopefully people will continue to see that. So I appreciate you asking me to be on your show, and for your really pretty lipstick and nails that I've been noticing all
Thank
day.
you.
So,
I do.
you know
I kind of color coordinate everything.
Yes, I love it, I love it. I'm like, "I should have
Yes.
done that too," but, like, so, I mean, I appreciate that because I get to meet people like you, and, I mean, those are the best things of this, is that I get to meet so many wonderful people and kind of vibe off of them, on shared likes and things like that. So I think that's the best.
Yeah, that's what when you were saying it, it's a very introverted thing, I think, because I'm like mega introvert as well. So I think even your readers, I'm sure there are extroverts that read, but like I bet there are a lot of readers that are introverted too. So it's probably like kind of cool that they're consuming it too, because it's like I probably wouldn't start a podcast if it weren't about like books
Mhm,
because I'm
mhm.
introverted. So it's kind of cool that introverts kind of like have something shared to talk
Right,
about in that way.
right,
But was
definitely.
was I seeing that your book was like up in Times Square? Was that what you were posting about too?
Yes, yes, because the marketing team did that, and I was like, "That's really cool." And so, the book cover was on a billboard in Times Square. It was there for the like month of December, all the way through. I think the ball drop, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like I wish that I had known that a little bit earlier, so that I could have made a trip there to see it
Yeah.
myself. But they took pictures for me and sent it, and I just never honestly thought that, that would ever happen. Like if a couple of people read the book, I was, happy for that. But that, they even believed in it so much that they, got it on the billboard, and that it's been on some bestseller list is just really, it just blows my mind. So yeah, I was really
Yeah, some of that like imposter syndrome at first. That's like, I'm just writing my book, but then everyone's like, no, this is great.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I still deal with that imposter syndrome. That thing is a beast, let me tell you.
It is so
Oh my god.
annoying.
Yes.
That's what I was even noticing with this. Like at first when you start a podcast, you're like, oh, I'm not a podcaster, or like, not really. And then
Mhm.
like you do one and you're like, okay, that means you are. Then your imposter syndrome's like, what if you aren't?
Right, right.
It's
Like
all
that's
about getting past that.
right.
Awesome. So do you have a release date? I can't remember for the next book.
The last I checked, I think they said September, maybe 23rd, but I'm not 100% on the actual date.
Okay.
I just know sometime in September.
Of this year.
Yes, of this year, sorry.
Nice. Okay, cool. So everybody can look forward to that in
Mhm.
September. And then where can people find you or just kind of whatever you want to plug?
Right. So I am on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is at Yasa writer. And then I'm also on Instagram. I'm just new on Instagram, so you might not see too many things except for like, what, repost, I guess. And that is
Yeah.
author underscore Yaz.
So hopefully people go there so that they can follow you. And then hopefully we can talk about your second book here sometime after it comes out in September.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.